Good evening. Glad to have you with us on this, another edition of the Mystery Wine Blind Tasting at Field and Main with our wonderful tasting community found certainly within our Northern Virginia region, DC and Maryland and beyond, as many of you have taken these wines to your vacations, to your other spots, to friends and family, and shared this experience with those. And for that, I'm always grateful. So who's joining us tonight? On this beautiful, beautiful evening. I would forgive you if certainly if you had other program set up there this evening that had you outside. In fact, some of our regular tasters are dining with us right now in one of the cabanas, enjoying for the first date night in a while. We at Field and Main have decided, as of this point going forward, thanks to the regulations that have been put out and the advice from the governor, that we're no longer wearing masks. So it's another step toward being one step further out of this COVID experience. And so, but this experience is something that has developed as a result of COVID, and for that I will always be grateful, and more than grateful, gratified by how the connections that were formed in the process of doing these events have been lasting, and not just with me and you, but with you and you. And Jan and Bobby Burse were in this week with Susan Crandall, kind of having a meal together and enjoying some of our other mystery wines that we were pouring and just having a great time with each other. And that is wonderfully gratifying. And I see now that Susan and Jan and Bobby are joining us. And hi, Kathy, to you. Welcome. Good evening. Glad to have you here as well. As everybody starts to chime in a little bit, I want to give you some more housekeeping notes. We are going to take 2 weeks off of this in July and 2 weeks off in August. We'll be open as a restaurant in July, but I'm going to take a little vacation with family, and so we'll be away for that period of time. And then we're going to close for a period of time in August to do a little renovation and to give the overall team a little bit of a break, as we then will reopen on September 1st, which is our actual 5th anniversary. So a renewal of sorts 5 years in. It's exciting to be able to do that. So we will be closed July, or not doing this tasting, July 8th and 15th, although we will be open. And we will also not be doing this tasting on the 12th and the 19th of August. But as of, or coming up now, next week, we will have wines available through September 9th. And so if you want to make your way here at any point and collect some of the wines in advance and not have to make your way back, and certainly with respect to August when we're closed, especially for that latter week, we will have a tasting available, but we'll just be opening a week after that. You'll want to come in and grab some of those wines. So I'll reiterate this in the next coming weeks, but I thought I would mention that as we are joined by, well, Chris is actually joining us now. That's great. Chris and Courtney are outside dining. Rob and Kathy are with us, and the Kestenbaums are with us, and Trish and Andy and Kathy. And that's fantastic. And Kathy Lang-Wiedemann is with us this evening, breathing, which is fantastic. It's always a good thing to be able to breathe, especially when you're sniffing and evaluating wine. This wine's changed a little bit already since I poured it, and I just poured it about 2 minutes before I clicked live. So what do you see, folks? Let's start. What do we have here? We have a red, and we have what color? Is it purple, ruby, sort of? Is there any tawnying elements there? Anything that shows you an indication of age or? This has sort of a rubyish color to me, maybe kind of a little hint of purple in the core, but more on the ruby side of things. Does it have any rim variation? Do you see any kind of that watery rim, which might indicate a little bit more alcohol? Do you see any rim variation just in terms of a change in color, especially if that rim is a touch browner or more tawny? That might indicate a bit of age. See anything like that to tell you or give you a clue as to what this wine might be or its age? Hello, Chris. Welcome. Great to have you here this evening, sir. As always, we're talking this week, and just everybody I was talking with was impressed that you would join in on our conversations and have the wines and contribute to. And so you're part of this wine community for and have been for such a long time that it's a great value to us to have you in this chat. So thank you, sir, for joining us this evening. Kathy's saying a little bit purplish. Okay. How about overall appearance? I don't know if you have the wine, Chris, but it's got a little formation of legs. You can kind of just start to see that it is creating a little bit of a rim and dropping some tears. They're not speedy. This wine might have a little bit more substance to it. It would be a little higher in alcohol, I think, based on that appearance, and that purplish kind of cast, the ruby purple, would indicate perhaps that we're dealing with a wine that has a bit more tannin structure and a little thicker skin, maybe a riper profile. And Susan, yes, I agree. It's got a little bit of a rim, but it's real thin. It's not enough to indicate kind of substantial age, I think, in the wine. So I'm not thinking this is a terribly old wine, and that's been the typical case. But it's still always good to build that process in and look for that, because if you do see that, that's going to indicate something for you going forward. And who knows what Tony can find. So he might one day throw in a 10, 15-year-old wine for us, and that would be something fun to try. And Kathy, you're noting some color in the tears. When you see that, what does that mean to you? What color in the tears, what does that mean? This appearance, I think, gives you a fair indication of a direction to head, right? Once again, I don't know that we're looking at something like Pinot Noir or Gamay. I don't think we're looking at something that's particularly cool climate, but we could be wrong. And thus, we're thinking about where this wine might take us, and thank you for that response, Kathy. But yes, exactly. So a little bit more extraction from the skins, a skin that's thicker so you can get that extraction, and thus you see a little bit of that color in the actual tear formation or the leg formation on the side of the glass, an indication that you have a wine that might be coming from a more ripe climate, or at least have a little bit more density to it, to the varietal, right? So you're going to get something more Cabernet as opposed to Pinot, right? And that's not to say that I think this is Cabernet, but based on the appearance alone, you can start to differentiate this wine from the varietals it might be. Chris has tasted it and said it's a bit sweeter. That's neat. It's got a very fascinating nose. For me, at first, was really red fruit, and it kind of exploded, but softly, like it just gently kind of blossomed. I think it's a better word than explode. And there was a little blossomy note to it. Now some of that fruit, it was pure red fruit, and now it's a little bit more like kind of fruit leather, as opposed to just straight fresh fruit. What do you smell? Fruit, earth, and wood. What fruits are you picking up? Any earthen notes? Any woody notes? Yeah, there is this kind of a baking element that would just faintly kind of coming through. Cannelé in Bordeaux is a small little pastry that has sort of burnt sugar, caramelized, very caramelized sugar on the outside of it. I got a note of that. It's sort of soaked in that sugar, so you've got this flaky pastry, well, not flaky, a more cakey pastry, and then soaked, kind of babo rum style, if you will, with this kind of burnt sugar element. So some of the fruit profile on this is going more in that confectionery kind of mode. Interesting. Keeps evolving, doesn't it? Here comes Susan, as she does each week, which is wonderful, with her fantastic descriptions. Cooked red cherry, yes, thank you for that. Raspberry, a little bit of cinnamon, so some of that spice might be indication of some of the kind of char on oak and leather. Chris is saying a nice sweet cherry smell. And Tom is putting out some pure fruit, some residual sugar, she's wondering, and that's pretty cool because Chris said the same thing. I haven't tried it yet to know, but it has a sort of sweet profile that's coming through in the fruit aromas, and that's part of what can sometimes fool us about a wine, is that those sweetened fruit profiles and then a little bit higher alcohol, if it's taken to dry, can sometimes be perceived as sweet, even though it is technically not. And we'll determine that actual residual sugar sweetness as we take our first sip. And on the conclusion of that sip, you'll find whether or not there'll be some residual sugar lingering kind of in that sort of syrupy way, or whether or not it's just higher alcohol production because it had so much potential ripeness, and the profile of fruit as a result, the aromatics of the fruit are such that that ripeness is reflected in that way as opposed to some actual residual sugar. So, Kathy, oh great, cupcake dough. Yeah, yes, that's great. So there's a little bit of a wood reference in the cinnamon spice and some of that dough spice. There might be a little bit of a yeastiness kind of in this as well. Susan, you're saying it's off dry. Cool. So, all right, we're gonna have to taste this now. Let's taste this and work on the palate and see, is it dry, off dry? What's the acidity like? Where's the tannin at? If you were studying our tastings and you were clocking my sideways eye glance and trying to catalog what those eye glances meant at 10 minutes and 58 seconds of this tasting, I looked this way as my first taste entered my mouth, and I began to think, what sweet red wines could we be tasting right now? And not having a whole bunch jump quickly to mind. People make sweet red wines, certainly, but as a classic prototypical sweet red wine, what might this be? Recioto from Valpolicella is one that jumps to mind, but I will have to rely a lot on you tonight. I mean, I've certainly had sweet wines that are made with intention from all over the world, but they're less because that's what the region dictates and more what that's what the producer wanted to make. And so I'm going to think about this for a minute, but I think I agree with you, Susan. This is a little bit off dry. It has a little bit of residual sugar. Sometimes you see like Chamberson, right? Done with a little residual sugar. That's tasty. Sometimes, it's kind of interesting. The sweetness, at least for the moment, makes it a little bit more difficult to determine the varietal because the sweetness sort of takes over the experience, and it's not super sweet. It's not uncomfortably sweet, but it's less a characteristic of the varietal and more the characteristic of the winemaking. And so, yes, I agree with you, Robert, 100% that it is not much in the way of tannin. It does have pretty high acidity, given all the residual. So maybe fermentation was stopped. I'm not getting a lot of heat. Anybody getting a lot of heat? So is this a higher alcohol potential wine? I think probably if it has a little of that residual. It's a happy wine, isn't it? I mean, juicy, pleasing. That fruit that was a little bit more on the dried side is still confectionery on the palate. Some of that raspberry, some of that cherry. Medium minus tannin for Susan with medium alcohol. Medium body, medium finish. It's definitely medium. It's not full. But it has an amplitude thanks a little bit to that residual sugar. And I don't know what we're talking about, a bunch of residual sugar. And the very finish, it's mostly dry. There's a hint of sugar that's hanging out a little bit. Courtney, you find it delicious? That's great. I'm glad of that. I don't think we've ever served this here, which is fascinating to me. Yeah, I agree. It's hard to pinpoint the varietal. It is an extra challenge because it is showing some of that character on the nose. And based off the nose, where would we take this? What varietal? Is this New World, Old World? And then does that help at all to kind of create an overarching kind of possibility set? And then can we pull from that possibility set out some of the wines that might be made with residual sugar? Or do we just need to kind of scrap that altogether and think about what wines might be made from residual sugar? And then the third way of approaching this would be to try to actually determine what this varietal might be just based on its own merits. And as we pointed out, that's a little bit more difficult. So Old World, Kathy's going Old World too. Do you have any sentiments or thoughts, guys, Chris and Kathy, about where in the Old World? Chris is thinking Austrian and German. Interesting. Okay. I'm teeing up to learn something this evening for sure. If it's Austrian or German, is it, say, Blaufränkisch? Is it? It has some of that softness that Blaufränkisch has. Zweigelt, Saint Laurent. Saint Laurent has a little bit more angularity typically that I've tasted, and the Zweigelt, same thing. Kathy's leaning with Chris. Interesting. Yeah, Blaufränkisch is kind of where, if I was in Austria, I would guess. And there is just seemingly a little bit of Blaufränkisch. Kathy's putting out Dornfelder. Thank you for that too. Yeah, so maybe Dornfelder. That's a 2, 3, 4 time, 5 time experience in my life in terms of tasting, and none that I recall having a lot of residual sugar. But to be fair, I'm not sure I would have cataloged as much or paid as much attention to a partially residual sugar, a partially RS'd Dornfelder. It's tasty, but I wouldn't have probably pulled that in for our program, and so I wouldn't think of it or kind of catalog it in the same way I would a wine that I was actually considering for the program. And that's a statement, unfortunately, on sweet wines. And I typically like to pound the drum for sweet wines, especially wines like Chenin Blanc and Riesling, things that have beautiful sweetness that balances out high acid and makes for a more complete beverage. But I'm not as much an advocate for a sweet red, although I do love something like Brachetto d'Acqui, for example, that is a sparkling red that is absolutely delicious and fully sweet. So there's potential here for a nice red that is, I mean, super quaffable and very tasty. And gosh, we have a course on the present menu right now that's beets and strawberries. It's coming to the very end of it. The overwintered beets and the strawberries with the last bit of storms are now not any longer, and so the dish will go away. But having that sweet savory interplay, the sweetness of the beets, but it's a savory item, the savoriness of the strawberries because of their preparation kind of made into a sofrito, but their natural sweetness would be beautiful and delightful with a wine like this. So it has its absolute place. Kathy's saying that Dornfelder is definitely a very, very fruity, I think is what she's saying from what she remembers. So maybe Dornfelder. So why, Chris, if you're still chiming in, and Kathy, why German and Austrian here? As opposed to, say, Italian. I don't think it's, the acidity here, I don't think takes me to Spain as much. But what if we had something like New York, in terms of a New York red here produced? Would we find this in Argentina? South Africa, would we see something like this profile? What takes you to those places? And I agree, Kathy, with your note that this would be really nice with a light chill. I would happily drink this on a summer evening outside with all manner of little nibbles and bites, and it would be kind of a thing that, because the tannins are low, if you had a light sort of summer fare, it's not going to conflict too much, and it's just going to be pleasant. And her response then to my question, certainly about it being a little bit more off dry because of that style being more something you see consistently in Germany and Austria than, say, in Italy. That takes you there. So playing more the region and place and the typicity of styles. And Tom is saying that this strikes her as a little bit more New World. Where would you take it then, if it's a more New World? Where do you want to go? Could this be sort of a Barbera from California or from Oregon or something that has a little bit of residual sugar to it? There's a perfumey, a floral, but almost a soapy floral note now that's kind of coming out too. That it's slight herbaceousness, like a cilantro stem. It's interesting. This one keeps changing. And 100% agree with your daughter Shannon, Robert. This would be an ideal base setting for sangria for sure. This would be delicious. Anytime I'm getting a lot of acidity here. I mean, I'm in a medium plus range for acidity, despite having that little bit of residual sugar. So, but that doesn't take me necessarily to Barbera. I'm just kind of trying to consider whether or not there's something else to look for. Okay. Oh, second pour, a little bit more earthy. That may just need to blow off a bit. It's just I think from a general profile, and it's been so consistent that we see this every week, between 18 and 22 minutes, the wine changes, and it has a little bit more kind of a musky, wet concrete profile for me. It has that high acidity. It has ripeness overall. Yeah, Chambourcin, I'm not getting any of that foxiness that you sometimes get, but it is a little bit more of that funk on the second pour. It would be pretty cool if it was Chambourcin, because it's a nice Chambourcin. I mean, it's a really enjoyable one. And I have had Chambourcins, of course, on the port side of things, kind of a late harvested Chambourcin. I've had Chambourcins that are completely dry and are easygoing, a little bit more Beaujolais-like. This has a density and a texture to it, and maybe that's because of the residual sugar. Again, we're not picking up a lot of tannin. There wouldn't be on a Chambourcin. Robert, that's okay. It's an open book test. And I have zero or maybe one experience with Bobal. I really don't know a lot, and I've seen it in the Wine Folly sheets too. Maybe share with us what the descriptions are for Bobal, because if it's that, I have no idea really enough to guide you or lead you in that direction. So share with us the Wine Folly notes on Bobal. Maybe it's something to consider, and how fun would that be to be trying something? I know a number of you had a chance because of this tasting to try some wines that you wouldn't have otherwise picked for yourself to try, and that would be great. And I think, I mean, I certainly have. I've never had a Tannat Zinfandel like we had a number of weeks back, kind of almost in the first month or two. So I too have had that experience, and I've never really had a chance to, although I didn't taste with you that wine, but a couple weeks ago the Pinot Blanc from Michigan, I got a chance to try that wine in order to pick it for this, and that was lovely. So having the opportunity to try something that I don't know is welcome. So fruity, soft tannins, medium acid. Yeah, it's definitely all of that. Jen, you're saying Bobal too, so you've had some Bobal? I mean, that'd be great. You know, I mean, that'd be fun. I think a New York Dornfelder, that's pretty cool. I think there's some chance that we're in the New World with a very old world kind of varietal, and then that residual sugar is sort of intentional in the production. There's some chance, of course, that we are in the old world and that residual sugar is there. And that's what I mean by that residual sugar making it a little bit more difficult to pinpoint exactly where this is coming from. So New York Dornfelder, Austrian Dornfelder, Blaufränkisch. Maybe we're talking about Ket Chamberson. Maybe where else? Anything else to really consider? I might be missing something that we talked about. Oh, Bobal, of course, excuse me. Blackberry, pomegranate, licorice, black tea, cocoa powder. Are those also descriptors for the Bobal? Because this is less those descriptors for me. Much more on the red side of things, the cherry, the raspberry. Sharon, yeah, the reveal coming shortly. I can't wait to know too because I'm completely stumped. But the black tea, cocoa powder, kind of I don't see as much of that here. Power of suggestion, and now searching, I can get a kind of a faint hint of cocoa powder, but the black tea not as much, and nor the tan kind of element of that. Licorice not so much for me. More on that red fruit, pomegranate maybe. More of that raspberry kind of cherry. This is fascinating. It's very well put together. It's kind of complete. It has complexity to it, and yet at the same time, it's relatively simple, or lacking a really true complexity, but it has a lot going on. Enough going on to be really interesting. So I wouldn't say this is like a very pedigreed or a very expensive wine. I mean, we sold it probably for $25. Yeah, so it's not, but that was sort of a takeaway too today. Tony handed me a glass. He handed me 2 glasses today. One was a skin-contacted Chardonnay from Eastern Europe, and then the other was a Brunello. And the Brunello, as I tasted it, it was a wine of quality and substance, and you could see that because it just had this full density, a full package in the mouth that was pretty special. This has a lot to offer, but it's not quite as pedigreed. And so Dornfelder would be, again, an experience for me that I have had very few occasions to taste, certainly not blind. And so I like that idea. I think I'm trying to figure out here whether or not it's old world or new world. And I think because of the relative layers of experience in this, I'm going to go old world. I think I like the Blaufränkisch. I think I like the Austrian Dornfelder or Blaufränkisch kind of call. I don't think I have enough here to kind of call this Chamberson, but I have walked away from things like that call and been proven wrong and real close. So Susan's going 2019, a younger New York Dornfelder, which is pretty neat. And I'm going to go, 19, Austrian, and a total guess would be Dornfelder for me. Thanks to your help with respect to Chris just got distracted by the beets that I was talking about a second ago. So Chris, how are the beets with this in particular? I think that might be a fun pairing. Okay, so Susan's there. Kathy's going Dornfelder, Germany. More than off dry, probably lowish alcohol. So yeah, it's definitely not hot. So I mean, we're probably in the 12% range of alcohol, but then 2 or so degrees of that potential alcohol is in the residual sugar here, and so that gives you an option at how we get there. Ariel's going to say New World Virginia Chamberson, and I like that too. Jan's going to throw out Finger Lakes. I think that's pretty cool. Absolutely. I mean, there's a range there that, or a series of places that we're picking out, sort of the Germanic varietal, done with little residual sugar, placed with a cooling element, but there's some ripeness here. There's a faint hint of sort of an herbal element, but it's really faint. It took 20 minutes to come out, so it wasn't really pronounced. And there's very low tannin, a relatively high acidity. Kathy, you think 2 to 3% residual sugar? The acidity fools us. Yeah, it keeps it in check for sure. All right. Sharon, your wait is over. Let's check it out. The acidity is definitely really persistent. Screw cap. Dornfelder. Medium sweet from Villa Wolf from Dr. Ernst Losen. So this is German from the Pfalz 2019. It's 10.5% alcohol and definitely has that medium sweetness. That's pretty cool. Medium bodied red wine with flavors of plums and cherries, balanced by velvety tannins. Dornfelder grape is native to Germany and has an intense color and pairs well with a wide variety of meals. Well, thank you for that descriptor there, yes. It's tasty. It is, it's a fun wine. So Dornfelder, catalog that, and with the indication that it's medium sweet. And so this probably does have a fair amount of residual sugar. This is a pretty tasty little bottle. And I applaud Tony for putting a medium sweet red wine into our tasting. That's really great. I think that's, lasagna, Kathy, perfect. You know, I mean, there's many an Italian wine experience drank out of little juice glasses as opposed to actual wine glasses, where this is essentially the profile: high acid, super fruit, and a little bit of sugar, and just carafe after carafe after carafe, just going down very, very easy. That's kind of perfect for lasagna, I think. Yeah, it's a fun curveball for sure. I agree. It's very nice. It's not a wine I would pick. Like, it's for personal. I would probably not choose to drink this wine or select it, and yet it's totally enjoyable. But every once in a while you feel like a soda, or you feel like something that has some sweetness to it, and you enjoy it thoroughly. It's the first taste we develop. It means safety. It means food is okay to eat because it's sweet. It's ripe, and it doesn't pose any real threats. From an evolutionary standpoint, it speaks to us. So sweet wines have a place, and they speak to us on that fundamental level in a very special way. So, and thank you for that, Courtney. Courtney and Chris are enjoying a present menu presently, and this wine would be fun with a number of those courses. So yeah, that salsa, that kind of strawberry sofrito with the beets, and this would be amazing. Won't kick a medium sweet wine out of bed, just saying. No, absolutely not. No, absolutely. A medium sweet wines need loving too. So to that, once again, for those of you that maybe joined a little bit later, we have wines coming in next week that will push us all the way through September 9th. So we'll have those on site if you want to pick up any of those wines, and we'll have sort of a 2-week hiatus in July and a 2-week hiatus in August. And if you look for those wines as we launch them on the online setting, you'll see that there's 2 weeks blocked off in August and 2 weeks skipped in July as well, for some time off for myself and the team. And in August, as we do close sort of that second week of August, if you want to have the wine for the last week of August, you'll have to pick it up before then. But I'll be here throughout some of the kind of the renovations and things, so if you also want to shoot me a note and say you're dropping by, I can probably figure out a way to get you some of those wines in those 2 weeks as we are closed. All right, folks, have a great week. Thank you again, as always, for spending some time with me and this lovely medium sweet wine, which I'm going to go finish. Until next week, I'll see you then. Cheers.